What if the most decisive element in a courtroom, the very thing that separates a guilty verdict from an innocent one, isn't a piece of evidence at all? What if it's a hidden glitch in the human mind, a subconscious flaw that operates silently within the jury box? A landmark study concluded that a conservative estimate of 4.1% of all defendants sentenced to death in the United States are innocent. That's one person in every 25. For every 25 people facing the ultimate punishment, one of them is not guilty. Now, put yourself in that jury box. The room is quiet. The weight of someone's entire future is on your shoulders. Your decision could mean freedom, a life behind bars, or even death. You've sworn to be impartial, to look only at the facts. But are you sure your own mind isn't playing tricks on you? Are you certain the verdict you're about to deliver is based purely on the evidence, and not on some secret, deeply ingrained mental trap? Because the same shortcuts your brain uses every single day to make life easier can become devastating weapons inside a courtroom, twisting perception and condemning the innocent. This is how it happens. Before we even step into the courtroom, we have to get one thing straight about our brains. They're built for efficiency, not for absolute accuracy. Every second of every day, you're bombarded with millions of pieces of information. To cope, your brain creates mental shortcuts, these lightning-fast filters to make sense of the world without getting bogged down. Psychologists call them cognitive biases. Think about looking at the clouds and seeing a face or a dragon. You know it's just water vapor, but your brain is hardwired to find familiar patterns. Or think about meeting someone for the first time. You instantly make dozens of micro-judgments based on their clothes, their handshake, the way they talk. These aren't moral failings. It doesn't make you a bad or prejudiced person. It's a feature of being human. It's the brain's way of creating order from chaos. And in our daily lives, these shortcuts are mostly harmless. If you wrongly assume the person in the expensive suit is successful, the consequences are pretty minimal. But when you take that same brain, with the same efficient pattern-matching operating system, and put it in a jury box, those harmless glitches can lead to catastrophic failures. The stakes are no longer a simple misjudgment. They're life and liberty. Jurors are expected to be rational and logical, but psychological research shows this is an almost impossible standard. When jurors get overwhelmed with complex legal jargon or ambiguous evidence, their brains do what they're designed to do. They fall back on intuition, on gut feelings, on those very same mental shortcuts, and that's when the mind traps spring open. Mind Trap 1. The story we tell ourselves. The first and maybe the most powerful mind trap is called confirmation bias. At its core, it's our tendency to favor information that proves what we already believe. But in a courtroom, it takes on a more insidious form, known as the story model. From the moment a trial starts, jurors don't just passively absorb facts. They actively try to build a coherent story of what happened, a narrative that makes sense, with a beginning, a middle, and an end. The danger is that jurors often settle on their preferred story way too early. It might be based on an opening statement, a particularly emotional testimony, or even negative media they saw before the trial. Research shows many jurors have a hard time disregarding pre-trial media coverage during deliberations. Once that initial narrative, that he seems like the guilty type story, takes root, confirmation bias kicks in with a vengeance. From that point on, the juror's brain doesn't evaluate evidence impartially. Instead, it sorts it. Evidence that fits the guilty story gets more weight. It's seen as more credible, more important. It shines under a mental spotlight. Meanwhile, Evidence that contradicts the story, an alibi, a weak timeline, a lack of physical proof, is subconsciously downplayed, scrutinized with extra suspicion, or just dismissed. It's like trying to fit puzzle pieces together. If a piece doesn't fit the picture you're already building, you're more likely to think the piece is wrong, not that the picture in your head is flawed. This creates a terrifying snowball effect. Each piece of confirming evidence makes the initial belief stronger, which in turn makes it even harder for contradictory evidence to break through. The juror isn't being deliberately unfair. They genuinely believe they're connecting the dots, but they're only connecting the dots that fit the picture they started drawing on day one. They see what they expect to see, and in a courtroom, that can lead an innocent person down a path with no escape. Mind Trap 2. Judging a book by its cover. The second mind trap is one we all know in principle, but we fail to see just how deeply it affects high-stakes decisions. It's called the representativeness heuristic, a fancy way of saying we judge people based on how well they match a mental stereotype we already hold. Imagine a juror has a preconceived notion, built from years of TV shows and news stories, of what a criminal looks or acts like. Now a defendant is brought in who, for whatever reason, fits that prototype. Maybe it's their ethnicity, their clothes, their accent, or just their demeanor. Before a single piece of evidence is presented, their brain might send up a red flag. This person fits the mold. This is where things get really dangerous, because it can lead to racial bias and other prejudices, where defendants who look like stereotypical criminals are seen as more likely to be guilty. This isn't always about conscious, overt racism, though that can exist. It's about the subtle, implicit biases we all carry. Studies have shown that when evidence in a case is fuzzy, jurors are more likely to convict defendants from social groups they're not familiar with. A juror might not be aware of it, but their brain is taking a shortcut. Instead of asking, does the evidence prove this specific person committed this specific crime? Their brain subconsciously asks, is this the type of person who would commit this crime? The case of Guy Miles is a tragic example. Despite having 9 alibi witnesses placing him in another state, he was convicted by an all-white jury. The conviction rested on shaky eyewitness identification, but Miles fit a profile, and that was enough to trump a mountain of exonerating evidence. He spent 19 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit before the real perpetrators confessed. This is the representativeness heuristic in action, where the story of who someone appears to be becomes more powerful than the facts of what they did or didn't do. Mind Trap 3. The echo chamber of the jury room. The third mind trap doesn't activate when a juror is alone. It waits until they step into the deliberation room. It's the immense power of group conformity. We are social creatures, driven by a deep need to belong. This social instinct, while great for survival, can be a disaster for justice. The classic research on this is Solomon Asch's famous conformity experiment. In the 1950s, Asch asked people to join a group for a simple vision test. Match the length of a line to one of 3 others. The answer was always obvious. But here's the catch: everyone else in the group was an actor, told to unanimously give the wrong answer. The real participant, hearing everyone give an answer that was clearly false, had to choose trust their own eyes or go with the group. A shocking number of people conformed to the group's wrong answer at least once, not because their vision failed, but because the psychological pressure to not be the lone dissenter was overwhelming. Now, translate that to a jury room. Imagine you're one of 12. You believe the defendant is innocent, but the first 2 jurors to speak are confident, and they both argue passionately for a guilty verdict. Then a third joins them, and a fourth. Suddenly, you're in the minority. The pressure builds. Do you speak up and risk looking foolish or causing conflict, or do you start to doubt yourself? Research on real juries found that the verdict preferred by the majority on the first ballot becomes the final verdict over 90% of the time. This shows how incredibly hard it is to sway an initial majority. A single dominant juror can frame the evidence in a way that creates a powerful consensus. Dissenting voices are often suppressed, not by bullying, but by the quiet pressure to conform. Jurors might even change their votes just to be agreeable or to end a stressful process. This is the echo chamber effect, where the desire for harmony overrides the pursuit of truth. These individual mind traps are made even more dangerous by blind spots baked into the legal process itself. One of the biggest is the lack of legal understanding. Jurors with no legal training are handed complex instructions filled with jargon. One study found huge confusion over the most basic concept in criminal law, beyond a reasonable doubt. When asked what it meant, juror interpretations were all over the place, from being sure the person is guilty to just thinking it's pretty likely. When people are confused, they don't stop and ask for clarity. They fall back on what feels right, their biases and gut instincts. Then there's the trap of hindsight bias. Once we know how something turned out, it's nearly impossible to remember what it felt like not to know. A crime has happened. Looking back, everything that led up to it can seem like an obvious, predictable sequence of events. Jurors might look at a defendant's actions and see them as far more intentional or negligent than they actually were. They think, well, they should have known this would happen. This bias unfairly judges past decisions through the lens of present knowledge, making it incredibly hard to fairly assess someone's state of mind at the time. The system asks ordinary people to perform an extraordinary task, to be perfectly rational in an environment designed to be confusing, without giving them the tools to overcome the known flaws in human cognition. It's easy to hear all this and feel like the system is hopelessly flawed, but it's not. Recognizing these mind traps isn't about losing faith in the jury system. It's about making it stronger, and there are clear, evidence-based ways to do that. First, we can improve jury instructions. Simply giving jurors clear, plain language written instructions that they can refer to has been shown to significantly boost comprehension. Teaching jurors about cognitive biases before a trial can also help them be more mindful of their own thought processes. Second, we can enhance jury diversity. When a jury is made up of people from different backgrounds and life experiences, it's much harder for a single stereotype to take over. A diverse jury is more likely to challenge assumptions, question preconceived notions, and cancel out individual biases, leading to a fairer deliberation. Ultimately, the secret mind traps that create guilty verdicts aren't secret at all. They are well-documented, predictable features of our psychology. But a courtroom isn't a place for speed. It's a place for slow, deliberate justice. The integrity of our legal system rests on the integrity of the minds tasked with weighing a person's fate. Making sure those minds are aware of their own hidden flaws is the most crucial step we can take toward ensuring that a guilty verdict is a reflection of the evidence and never just a trick of the mind.